The conference hall stretched wider than 3 football fields. Dr. Brooks stood at the edge of the massive room, watching alien species from across the galaxy showcase their medical technology. His hands rested in the pockets of his white lab coat, and he tried not to look impressed. It was hard. A doctor demonstrated a regeneration pod that could heal broken bones in minutes. The crystalline showed off cellular reconstruction chambers that regrew entire organs. Another species unveiled swarms that could stitch wounds from the inside out. Each presentation drew applause and excited chatter from the hundreds of delegates packed into Station 7's main exhibition center. Lisa Martinez stood beside, her tablet clutched in both hands. She was the biomedical engineer on the human delegation, and she looked as nervous as felt. This was humanity's first invitation to the Galactic Medical Conference. They had spent months preparing their presentation. "We're up next," Lisa whispered. Nodded, he picked up the simple plastic case that held their demonstration materials. As they walked toward the stage, he heard whispers from the alien delegates. Some looked curious, most looked doubtful. The human display table seemed plain compared to the glowing machines and floating holograms around it. Set-down boxes of gauze, rolls of medical tape, bottles of antiseptic, and packages of adhesive bandages. Band-aids, the most basic first aid supplies from Earth. Commander of the Empire sat in the front row. His 4 eyes studied the human supplies with obvious disappointment. Next to him, Dr. N's crystalline body refracted light as she leaned forward to see better. "Good afternoon," began. His voice carried through the hall's speakers. "I'm Dr. Brooks, and this is Dr. Lisa Martinez. We're here to share human emergency medicine with you." He held up a Band-Aid, still in its wrapper. Several aliens in the audience made sounds that the translation devices rendered as chuckles. "This is an adhesive bandage," continued. "We use it to cover small wounds and protect them while they heal. It's simple, cheap to make, and anyone can use it." Raised one of his long arms. "Dr. Brooks, forgive my confusion. Are you presenting historical artifacts? Surely humans have moved beyond such primitive methods." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression calm. "These aren't artifacts, Commander. We use these every day, in homes, schools, workplaces, and hospitals across human space." Anne's voice chimed like breaking glass. "But why? We abandoned adhesive strips thousands of years ago. They're inefficient, they fall off, they don't actually heal anything." Lisa stepped forward. "That's exactly the point. They're not meant to heal, they're meant to protect and give the body time to heal itself. Human medicine focuses on supporting natural healing processes." "How quaint," said. The translation made his tone sound polite, but his body language suggested mockery. "While you support natural processes, we simply regenerate the damage, much faster, much more advanced." Opened the Band-Aid package and held it up. The small strip of fabric-backed adhesive looked ridiculous compared to the technology surrounding them. "What happens when your regeneration pods lose power?" he asked. "Or when you're somewhere without your swarms? Human medical supplies work anywhere. They don't need electricity. They don't need rare materials. A child can use them." "A child's medicine for a child's understanding," another alien delegate called out. The crowd laughed again. Lisa's face flushed red, but she spoke steadily. "The Galactic Medical Database shows that equipment failure is the 3rd leading cause of preventable deaths in frontier colonies. Simple supplies don't fail. That's their strength." "Simple is just another word for backward," Anne replied. She gestured at the human display table. "Sticky fabric strips, liquid disinfectants, cotton pressed into shapes. These are museum pieces, not medical tools." Had prepared for skepticism, but the open contempt stung. He looked at Lisa, who gave him a small nod. They had more to show. "Let me demonstrate our philosophy," said. He took out a training dummy and created a simulated cut on its synthetic skin. "When a human gets injured in the field, we follow a simple process. Stop the bleeding, clean the wound, protect it. No complex equipment needed." He worked quickly, showing how pressure stopped bleeding, how antiseptic prevented infection, how a Band-Aid kept the wound clean. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. Stood up. "Commander Brooks, I mean no disrespect to your species, but you must understand how this looks to us. We can regrow limbs. We can cure diseases at the genetic level. We can replace hearts and lungs and brains. And you're showing us how to put sticky strips on cuts." The audience murmured agreement, saw other human delegates in the crowd looking uncomfortable. Admiral, who led the human delegation, had his arms crossed and his expression was tight. "Accessibility matters," said firmly. "Your regeneration pod costs more than most human families earn in a year. Our first aid kit costs less than a meal. Which one saves more lives across a whole population?" "The one that actually works," and said, "No offense intended." Lisa moved to stand next to. "We're not saying our medicine is better than yours. We're saying different situations need different solutions. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one." "And sometimes simple means inadequate," replied. He sat back down, clearly done with the conversation. The moderator, a tall alien with too many joints in its arms, gestured politely. "Thank you, human delegation, for your presentation. Perhaps our species can learn from each other's approaches, yes." It was a diplomatic way to end the disaster, packed up the supplies while Lisa gathered their materials. Around them, other delegates were already talking about the next presentation. The humans had become a footnote, a curiosity. As they left the stage, heard whispers and saw pointing. The universal language of mockery needed no translation. "That went well," Lisa muttered. "Could have been worse." "How?" Didn't have an answer for that. They walked back to their seats near the rear of the hall. Admiral gave them a sympathetic look but said nothing. The next presentation began. A species called the displayed their biofield healing technology. The audience watched with rapt attention. Nobody was laughing at them. Sat back and tried to focus on the presentation. He'd known this wouldn't be easy. Humanity was new to the galactic stage. Their technology seemed primitive to species that had been traveling stars for, but it worked. It saved lives. That had to count for something. The lights in the conference hall suddenly flickered. Conversations stopped. The presenter paused mid-sentence. Then alarms began to scream. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the massive station. The translation systems crackled with urgent messages in dozens of languages. Couldn't understand most of them, but he recognized the tone. Danger. Station Commander Oss appeared on every screen in the hall. His multiple limbs were moving frantically. The explosions hit before most delegates reached the exits. Felt the floor shake beneath his feet. A section of the conference hall's outer wall blew inward, sending metal and glass flying. The air rushed out through the breach, dragging people and equipment toward the gap. Emergency force fields snapped into place, sealing the hole. But the damage was done. Dozens of aliens lay scattered across the floor, injured or unconscious. Lisa shouted over the alarms. Here, she was 20 feet away, helping a small child to her feet. The child's crystalline arm had a crack running through it. More explosions rocked the station. The lights went out completely, then emergency backups kicked in. Everything looked red and harsh. Through the windows, saw the attacking ships. They were dark, angular vessels covered in weapons. Plasma bolts streaked from their guns toward the station. Station 7 fired back, but the attackers moved too fast. "Those are raiders," someone yelled, didn't know who. The crowd surged toward the emergency exits. Tried to stay close to Lisa, but the mass of panicking aliens pushed them apart. He saw her being carried down a different corridor with the child in her arms. "Get to the shelters," he called to her. She nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Let the flow of people carry him down a side passage. The station shuddered again, more plasma fire hitting the shields. He could hear them straining. A massive explosion somewhere above sent, and a dozen others tumbling to the floor. When he looked up, the corridor ahead had collapsed. Debris blocked the path completely. The aliens around him turned and ran back the way they came. Started to follow, then heard something. A voice calling for help. He stopped, listened. There it was again, coming from behind a damaged doorway. Pushed through the bent door frame into what looked like a medical supply room. Boxes and equipment lay scattered everywhere. In the corner, 3 aliens huddled together. One was bleeding badly from a wound across its chest. The plasma burn had cauterized the edges, but the injury was deep. "Help us," one of them said. The translator made the words sound hollow. Knelt beside them and opened his medical kit. The kit he'd brought for the demonstration. Band-aids and gauze and antiseptic. Suddenly those laughable supplies were all he had. "I'm a doctor," he said. "I'll do what I can." The burned alien was from a species didn't recognize. Blue skin, 3 arms, eyes that looked like mirrors. The plasma wound was worse up close. Without proper equipment, this alien would die. But had learned emergency medicine in field conditions, during the colony wars, in disaster zones, places where fancy equipment wasn't available. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic. The alien screamed, a sound that needed no translation, worked fast. He packed the wound with gauze to prevent infection. Then he wrapped medical tape around the alien's torso to hold everything in place. It wasn't pretty. It wouldn't heal the damage, but it might keep the alien alive until real help arrived. "Stay still," told them. "Don't move unless you have to." Another explosion shook the room, closer this time. Heard weapons fire in the corridors, not station security. These were different, harsher. The HAD boarded the station, moved to the doorway and looked out carefully. Down the hall, he saw armored figures moving through the smoke. They carried plasma rifles that glowed orange. When they fired, the bolts burned through walls and floors like they were paper. He pulled back into the supply room. The 3 aliens watched him with frightened eyes. "We need to move," said, but quietly. He helped the wounded one to their feet. The alien leaned heavily on him. They moved into the corridor, going the opposite direction from the soldiers. The emergency lights flickered, could smell burning metal and something chemical. The life support was struggling. They turned a corner and nearly ran into Commander. The commander was alone, his fancy uniform torn and burned. One of his 4 arms hung uselessly. His equipment belt was empty. Whatever advanced medical technology he'd carried was gone. Dr. Brooks said. He sounded surprised, maybe embarrassed. "Commander, you're hurt." "My regeneration injector was destroyed. I was trying to reach a medical bay." He looked at the aliens, was helping. "Are they stable?" "For now, come with us. We need to find shelter." Hesitated, saw pride and fear warring on the alien's face. Then another explosion made the decision for him. The commander nodded and followed. They moved through damaged corridors, always listening for soldiers. Twice they had to hide while patrols passed. His heart hammered each time. The wounded alien was getting weaker. The gauze had packed was soaking through. He needed to treat the wound again soon. They found another empty room, this one smaller. A storage closet filled with cleaning supplies. Guided everyone inside and closed the door. "Let me see your arm," he told. The commander looked uncertain. "Do you have regeneration equipment?" "No, I have this," held up his medical kit. Stared at the band-aids and tape, the same supplies he'd mocked hours ago. Now they were all that stood between him and his injuries. "That's it. That's it." For a long moment, nobody spoke, then extended his injured arm. Examined the damage. Plasma burn, not as severe as the other aliens, but still serious. The flesh was charred and swelling. Without treatment, infection would set in quickly. He cleaned the wound, applied antiseptic cream, covered it with gauze pads and secured them with medical tape. Basic first aid, the kind humans had been doing for centuries. "This won't heal you," said honestly, "but it'll protect the wound and reduce infection risk. Your body will do the actual healing." Looked at his bandaged arm. "I called this primitive." "It is primitive, but it works." More explosions, closer now. They were sweeping through this section of the station, checked his kit. He had enough supplies to treat maybe 3 more injuries. After that, he'd have nothing. The child appeared in the doorway, making jump. It was the same one Lisa had been helping. The child limped into the closet, alone. "Where's the woman who was with you?" asked. "The other human." The child made a chirping sound. "She told me to find you. She went to help others." Stomach tightened. Lisa was out there somewhere in a war zone trying to save people. Of course she was. He pulled the child close and examined her cracked arm. Bodies were different, crystal rather than flesh. But the principles were the same: stabilize the injury, prevent further damage. He wrapped the arm carefully with soft gauze, then secured it with a splint he made from pieces of broken equipment. The child watched him work with large, curious eyes. "Does it hurt?" asked. "Not anymore, thank you." The door to the closet suddenly buckled. Something hit it from outside. Hard, pushed everyone to the back of the small room. The door exploded inward. A soldier stood there, plasma rifle raised. The alien was huge, covered in dark armor, its face hidden behind a helmet. It said something in a harsh, guttural language. The translator couldn't keep up. Raised his hands slowly. He still held a roll of medical tape in one hand, not much of a weapon. The soldier aimed its rifle at its chest. The weapon charged up, glowing brighter. Then the floor beneath them all shook violently. Not an explosion this time, something worse. Through the hole where the door had been saw the corridor beyond. The outer wall was failing. The force field was flickering. The soldier turned toward the failing wall. In that moment of distraction, moved. Even injured, though was fast. He grabbed a piece of debris and swung it at the soldier's helmet. The impact knocked the soldier sideways. The plasma rifle fired, but the shot went wide, burning a hole in the ceiling instead of through's chest. "Run!" shouted. Grabbed the child and ran. The other aliens followed. Behind them, the soldier was getting up, angry and armed. They burst into the corridor. The force field failed completely. Air rushed out through the breach, felt himself being pulled toward the void. He grabbed onto a support beam with one hand, holding the child with the other. Caught the wounded alien before it was sucked out. Emergency bulkheads were slamming shut throughout the section, trying to contain the breach. Saw one closing ahead. If they could reach it before it sealed, they'd be safe. The sealed bulkhead held, but could hear plasma fire on the other side. They were cutting through. They had maybe 5 minutes before the soldiers broke through. "We need to move," said. He helped the wounded alien to its feet again. The blue-skinned being was barely conscious now. Led them down another corridor. His knowledge of the station layout was their only advantage. They moved as quickly as the injured could manage, which wasn't fast enough. His arms ached from supporting the wounded alien. The child, whose name was, walked beside him. Her splinted arm was holding, but she looked exhausted. They passed more bodies. Some were station security. Others were civilians caught in the attack. Wanted to stop and help, but he knew better. The living had to come first. They turned a corner and found someone else. A human man in an engineering uniform was trying to repair a damaged control panel. Sparks flew from exposed wiring. "Jake," called out. The man turned. He had grease on his face and his hands were burned. "Commander, what are you doing here?" "Same as you, trying to survive. This is Dr. Brooks." Jake wiped his hands on his uniform and nodded at, "Engineer from the delegation ship. I was helping with station maintenance when everything went wrong." "Can you fix it?" asked, gesturing at the panel. "No, the cut main power to this section. I was trying to reroute emergency power, but the damage is too severe." Jake looked at their group. "Is that everyone?" "Everyone we found," said. "Another explosion, different direction this time. They were everywhere." "We should head toward the central hub," Jake suggested. "If any part of the station is still defended, it'll be there." They moved together, 7 survivors in a war zone, kept checking his medical kit. He'd used half his supplies already. The wounded alien needed the bandages changed soon, or infection would kill him as surely as a plasma bolt. They found a maintenance room and ducked inside, sat the wounded alien down and went to work. He peeled off the old gauze, now soaked with blood. The wound looked worse, swollen and hot to the touch. "I need to clean this again," said. He used more antiseptic, applied fresh gauze, wrapped it tight with medical tape. His hands moved automatically, following procedures he'd practiced thousands of times. While he worked, Jake examined the room. It was full of equipment and supplies for station repairs. Adhesives, sealants, patching materials. He picked up a roll of something that looked like metallic tape. "Hull breach repair tape," Jake said. "Strong stuff, can seal a crack in the outer hull." Glanced over. The tape looked similar to the medical tape he was using, both designed to stick and hold under pressure. "How strong?" asked. "Rated for vacuum, temperature extremes, even some radiation." Jake frowned. "Why?" Didn't answer right away. He finished wrapping the alien's wound and moved to Czech's arm. The bandages there were still clean, holding well. "Plasma weapons work by superheating gas into an energy state," said slowly. "The bolts are held together by magnetic containment fields." "Okay," Jake said. "What happens if something disrupts that containment?" His eyes widened. The plasma disperses, loses cohesion, becomes less effective. Looked at the medical tape wrapped around his arm, then at the hull repair tape in Jake's hand. An idea was forming, a crazy idea. "When that soldier shot at us earlier," said, The blast hit the ceiling right above where I was standing. I should have been burned by the energy scatter, but I wasn't. "You were lucky," one of the other aliens said. "Maybe or maybe something else," stood up. "Let me see your arm again." The commander extended his bandaged arm, studied the layers of gauze and medical tape he'd applied. The materials were designed to stick to skin and stay put through movement and moisture. They were flexible but strong. "Jake, do you have any equipment that can detect plasma energy?" "There's a scanner in my kit. Why?" "Humor me." Jake pulled out a handheld device and powered it on. Took a plasma torch from the maintenance supplies. It was a small tool used for cutting metal. Nothing like a rifle, but it used the same basic technology. He fired the torch at the wall. The scanner showed high energy readings as expected. The plasma cut through the metal easily. Then took the medical tape from his kit. He layered it on another section of wall, 3 strips overlapping. He fired the plasma torch at the taped section. The plasma hit the tape and something strange happened. The energy dispersed, spread out. The tape blackened and burned, but the wall underneath remained intact. The scanner showed the plasma energy had dropped by 60%. Everyone stared. "That's impossible," said. Jake was already scanning the tape with other equipment. "The molecular structure, it's creating interference with the plasma's magnetic containment. Not much, but enough to weaken the bolt." His heart raced. "Try the hull repair tape." Jake layered the metallic tape on the wall, fired the plasma torch again. This time the energy dispersed even more. The tape held for 3 full seconds before burning through. The wall underneath was barely marked. "It works," Jake breathed. "Human adhesives actually work against plasma." Looked at his medical kit, at the rolls of tape and packages of band-aids, supplies that cost almost nothing, that every human ship carried in bulk, that aliens had laughed at just hours ago. "Why does this work?" asked. "Our shielding is designed specifically to stop plasma. Your tape is meant to stick things together." Jake was still scanning. Earth's atmosphere, the energy levels. Humans developed these adhesives on a high-radiation world with a strong magnetic field. The molecular bonding evolved to be stable in those conditions, conditions that happen to match plasma energy signatures. "You're saying human medical supplies can stop plasma weapons by accident?" another alien asked. "Not stop," corrected. "Weaken, disperse, make them less lethal, but yes, by accident." He pulled out a package of band-aids, the same ones and had called museum pieces. He unwrapped one and stuck it to his shirt over his heart. Then he layered medical tape over it. Then more band-aids, building up protection. "This is insane," said. "This is human medicine," replied. "Simple, cheap, available, and right now it might be the only advantage we have." Jake was already experimenting. He took some medical tape and combined it with the hull repair tape, creating a layered patch. He stuck it to his chest like improvised armor. "How many supplies do you have?" Jake asked. Checked his kit. "Enough for maybe 3 people, but there are more medical stations throughout the facility if they haven't been destroyed." Tugged on sleeve. "Will this protect us from the bad aliens?" Knelt down to her level. It'll help, but we still have to be careful." The little looked at the band-aid on his chest. "Can I have one?" Smiled and applied a band-aid to her cracked arm over the splint. "There, now you're protected too." The room shook, more plasma fire very close now. Through the walls they could hear soldiers shouting. "We need to decide," said. "Do we keep running or do we use this discovery?" Stood up, his mind was racing. If they could protect themselves, even partially, they could fight back. Maybe reach other survivors, maybe save the station. But it was a big if. They'd tested the adhesives against a small cutting torch. Plasma rifles were much more powerful, and they only had enough supplies to protect a few people. The central hub said, "If we can reach it, there will be more survivors, more supplies, and station security." "That's 3 sections away," Jake said, "through controlled territory." "Then we'd better get creative," started pulling out every bit of medical tape he had left. "You know the station, which route has the most cover?" The commander thought for a moment. "Maintenance tunnels, narrow passages, they are large, they'll have trouble maneuvering." "Can the wounded make that journey?" Everyone looked at the blue-skinned alien. He was conscious again, watching them with his mirror eyes. "I can manage," he said weakly. Then we go through the tunnels, started distributing the tape and band-aids. Cover vital areas, heart, major arteries, head if possible, layer it thick. They worked quickly, showed them how to overlap the adhesive strips for maximum protection. It looked ridiculous. Aliens covered in medical tape and cartoon band-aids, but ridiculous was better than dead. Jake found more hull repair tape in the supplies and added those to the mix. The metallic tape was harder to work with, but more durable. When they finished, they looked like mummies wrapped in mismatched bandages. Caught his reflection in a broken screen. He almost laughed. The most advanced species in the galaxy, and they were wearing band-aids as armor. "Everyone ready?" he asked. They nodded, even Little, her face set with determination. Opened the door carefully. The corridor outside was empty, but he could hear fighting in the distance. The station's power core was that way. If they took it, life support would fail. Everyone on the station would die. The maintenance tunnels were dark and cramped. Led the way, his medical scanner providing the only light. Behind him, the others moved single file, held onto the back of his coat. They'd been crawling through the passages for 20 minutes when they heard voices ahead. Human voices. Held up his hand, and everyone stopped. He moved forward carefully, listening. "Sarge, the power core is 3 sections away. We'd never make it through the lines. We have to try. If that core goes down, everyone dies." Recognized military discipline in those voices. He took a chance and called out softly. "Human forces, this is Dr. Brooks. I have survivors with me." Silence, then the sound of weapons being raised. "Come forward slowly," a woman's voice ordered. "Hands where we can see them." Crawled around the corner and found himself looking at 5 Marines in full combat armor. Their weapons were pointed directly at him. The woman in command had 3 stripes on her shoulder. Commander Price, according to her name tag. "Lower your weapons," said. "He's unarmed." She looked at his chest, covered in medical tape and band-aids. "What happened to you?" "Long story. I have 6 survivors behind me, 2 injured, one's a child." "Bring them forward." Waved the others ahead. The Marines stared as the other aliens emerged, all wrapped in makeshift bandages. Commander Price said, "Good to see human military." His eyes widened slightly at seeing the commander covered in medical tape, but she stayed professional. "Commander, sitrep. The control most of the station. They're moving toward the power core. If they take it, they can hold the station hostage or destroy it." "That's what we figured," looked at her team. "We were trying to reach the core when our route got cut off, lost 3 Marines getting this far." Jake spoke up. "We found something. These adhesives, the medical supplies, they weaken plasma weapons." The Marines exchanged glances. Sergeant Danny, a solid man with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward. "Say that again." Explained quickly. The tests they'd run. The way the molecular structure disrupted plasma cohesion. The Marines listened without interrupting. When he finished, Danny whistled low. "Band-aids stop plasma rifles. That's the craziest thing I've heard all day." "Not stop," corrected. "Weaken, you'll still get hurt if you're hit directly, but it might save your life." Was already thinking tactically. How much protection are we talking about? Based on our tests, maybe 60% reduction in energy transfer. More if you layer the materials thick enough. "And you have supplies." Held up his nearly empty medical kit. "Not enough for everyone." "There's a medical station 2 corridors from here," one of the Marines said. "I passed it during." "Is it still standing?" asked. "Was 20 minutes ago." Made a decision. Take 2 Marines and secure that medical station. Strip it bare. Every band-aid, every roll of tape, everything. Brooks, you go with them. Show them what works best. "Yes, ma'am." Looked at the rest of the group. "The rest of us will hold here. Move fast. We don't have much time." Jake, Danny, and 2 other Marines made their way through the tunnels. The medical station was in a section that had lost power. They used helmet lights to search through the wreckage. The storage room was intact. Boxes of medical supplies lined the walls. His heart jumped. Enough materials to equip a small army. "Take everything," Danny ordered. "Band-aids, tape, gauze, I don't care if it says for external use only. If it's sticky, we're taking it." They loaded up backpacks and equipment bags, showed them how to layer the materials, medical tape on the bottom for flexibility, hull repair tape on top for durability, band-aids to cover gaps. Build it thick over vital areas. A plasma bolt hit the wall outside the station. They were getting closer. Time to go, Danny said. They hurried back through the tunnels. When they reached position, she looked at the supplies and nodded approval. Everyone gear up. Brooks, teach my Marines your Band-Aid magic. The next 15 minutes were surreal. Trained combat Marines sitting still while wrapped them in medical supplies. He showed them the best patterns, where to layer thickest, how to maintain mobility while maximizing protection. Danny looked down at his chest, now covered in cartoon Band-Aids featuring spaceships and robots. I look like a kindergarten art project. A kindergarten art project that might survive a plasma bolt, replied. When everyone was covered, gathered them together. Here's the situation. They are about to take the power core. Once they have it, they control the station. We stop them here or everyone dies. Clear. Clear, ma'am. We're outnumbered but we have something they don't know about. Dr. Brooks says these adhesives work. We're about to test that in combat. Stay smart. Use cover. Don't assume the protection is perfect. Questions. Nobody spoke. Then let's take back our station. They moved through the corridors in tactical formation. Led, Danny brought up the rear, stayed in the middle with and the other survivors. The sounds of battle grew louder. Plasma fire, explosions, screams. They reached the power core section and found chaos. Station security forces were pinned down behind barricades. Soldiers advanced steadily, their plasma rifles cutting through everything. Bodies littered the floor. Contact front, said calmly. Marines standard assault pattern, Brooks stay behind cover. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency. They spread out, using the walls and debris for protection. Then they opened fire. The turn to face this new threat. They fired back, plasma bolts screaming through the air. One hit Danny square in the chest. The bolt struck the layered adhesives and dispersed. The energy spread across the surface instead of punching through. Danny stumbled backward but stayed on his feet. It works, he shouted. The crazy Band-Aids actually work. The Marines pressed forward, emboldened. Plasma bolts hit them, and while they felt the impacts, the shots didn't kill. Armor that should have melted held. Flesh that should have burned remained intact. The soldiers seemed confused. Their weapons were failing. The humans should be dead, but they kept coming. His voice cut through the chaos. Assault team flank left, covering fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. Half the Marines fired at the positions, while the others ran to new cover. They tried to focus their fire, but the Band-Aid armor gave the humans too much protection. Watched from behind a barricade, his heart pounding. The makeshift armor wasn't perfect. One Marine went down with a leg wound where the coverage was thinner. Another took a grazing hit to the head, but they were surviving shots that should have killed them instantly. The tide of battle shifted. Station security saw the Marines pushing forward and joined the assault. Aliens who'd been ready to surrender found new courage. A soldier charged directly at Danny. The sergeant met the charge head-on. Plasma bolts hit his Band-Aid-covered armor and dispersed. He got close enough to tackle and they went down fighting. Saw an opening. He grabbed his medical kit and ran forward, staying low. A wounded security officer was bleeding out behind a barrier, slid next to him and started working. Basic first aid, stopping the bleeding, stabilizing the injury. Stay with me, told the alien. You're going to be okay. More Marines pushed forward. The line broke. The aliens started falling back, retreating toward the power core's main entrance. His voice rang out. Press the advance, don't let them regroup. The Marines charged. Their Band-Aid armor was scorched and burned, but it held. They drove the back step by step. Jake appeared next to. The engineer was carrying a plasma rifle he'd picked up from a fallen soldier. We're winning, he said, sounding amazed. Don't jinx it. The fighting reached the power core entrance. This was where they made their stand. More soldiers poured out of the doorway, firing in disciplined volleys. A plasma bolt hits arm. The Band-Aids he'd layered there dispersed most of the energy, but pain still shot through him. The tape was burned away, and his skin underneath was blistered. Brooks is hit, Danny called out. I'm fine, lied. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. He'd treat it later. Right now, people needed him. They were falling back into the power core chamber itself. Signaled her Marines to hold position at the entrance. We've secured the approach, she said. But they still hold the core and they have hostages. Through the doorway could see station personnel being held at gunpoint. Technicians, scientists, civilians, at least 20 people. Standing among them was a large in decorated armor, the commander. He shouted something and the translator rendered it as a demand. Surrender or the hostages die. You have 1 minute to decide. Looked at her Marines. Their Band-Aid armor was barely holding together. They were exhausted, but they'd come this far. We don't leave people behind, said quietly. Ideas. Looked at his burned arm, at the medical supplies scattered across the floor. At Whohead's plan was simple, which seemed appropriate given how this whole situation had started. The commander doesn't know about our armor, said. He thinks his weapons work normally. We use that. Nodded slowly. You want to bait him. I want to walk in there, looking like an easy target, and make him waste his shots on me while your Marines breach from multiple angles. That's suicide, said. Not if the Band-Aids hold. Started peeling off burned tape and applying fresh layers from the supplies they'd gathered. The hostages are grouped near the back wall. If I draw fire toward the entrance, your people can come in from the side passages. Danny checked his tactical map. There are maintenance accesses on both sides of the power core chamber. Small entrances, but we can fit through. How long do you need? Asked. 3 minutes to get in position, maybe 2 more to breach. So I need to keep the commander's attention for 5 minutes. Studied's face. You're a doctor, not a soldier. I'm whatever we need right now. Finished wrapping his chest in fresh layers. Band-aids, medical tape, hull repair tape. He looked ridiculous again, but he felt slightly safer. Lisa suddenly appeared from behind them. His heart jumped with relief. She was dirty and exhausted, but alive. Lisa, I heard you were doing something stupid, she said. Figured I should be here to see it. She looked at his makeshift armor. Is that what I think it is? The Band-Aids they laughed at? Yes. This is insane. I know, but it's working. He pulled her into a quick hug. Stay here, stay safe. Not a chance. If you're going in there, you'll need medical backup. Before could argue, cut in. We're moving. Take your team through the left access. You have the right. I'll come through the main entrance with Brooks and Martinez. Coordinate on my signal. The Marines moved quickly into position. Watched them disappear into the maintenance passages. Then he looked at the power core entrance. Beyond it, the commander waited with his hostages and his plasma rifle. Ready? Asked. No, said honestly, but let's do it anyway. He stepped through the entrance, hands raised. Lisa followed close behind. The power core chamber was huge, filled with humming machinery. The commander stood in the center with his soldiers surrounding the hostages. When he saw, his translator rendered something like laughter. A doctor, the commander said. Unarmed, this is what humans send against me. I'm here to negotiate, called out. Let the hostages go. Why would I do that? They are my shield, my guarantee of safety. Took another step forward. His heart hammered against his ribs. Because you're going to lose, your raid failed. Human forces are retaking the station. Lies, my warriors are superior. Our weapons are unmatched. Then shoot me, prove your weapons work. The commander tilted his head, curious. Then he raised his plasma rifle and fired. The bolt hits chest dead center. The layered adhesives dispersed the energy across his torso. Felt heat and pressure, but the shot didn't penetrate. He stumbled back a step but stayed standing. The commander stared. Impossible. Your turn's over, said. His chest hurt and the bandages were smoking, but he was alive. Now. The Marines burst through both side entrances. Danny's team came in low and fast, weapons firing. They'd wrapped their weapons in adhesive tape too, and the plasma bolts that should have destroyed the guns instead scattered harmlessly. Charged through the main entrance with her team. The soldiers tried to respond, but confusion slowed them. Their unbeatable weapons weren't working. The humans should be dead, but they kept coming. The commander fired again and again at. Each shot dispersed across the Band-Aid armor. Felt like he was being hit by a hammer repeatedly, but the plasma didn't burn through. Lisa pulled out her own weapon, a small pistol. She wasn't military, but she knew how to shoot. She fired at the soldiers, threatening the hostages, driving them back. Danny reached the hostages first. Get down, he shouted. The civilians dropped flat as his team fired over them. They realized they were surrounded. Some tried to fight, others looked for escape routes, but the Marines had all exits covered. The commander roared something untranslatable and charged it directly. No weapon, just raw fury. The alien was huge and armored, easily twice size, but appeared from the side and tripped the commander mid-charge. The crash to the floor hard. Before he could rise, 3 Marines were on him, weapons pointed at his head. "Surrender," ordered. "All of you weapons down now." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the soldiers lowered their plasma rifles. They looked at each other, at the humans who should have been dead, at their failed weapons. One by one, they surrendered. Dropped to his knees, exhausted, Lisa ran to him and checked his injuries. The Band-Aid armor had saved his life, but taking multiple plasma hits at close range had still done damage. Burns covered his chest and arms. His ribs ached. "You're an idiot," Lisa said, but she was smiling. "An idiot with really good medical supplies," replied. The hostages were freed. Medical teams arrived to treat the wounded. Station security took the into custody. The battle for Station 7 was over. 3 days later, the medical conference reconvened in a repaired section of the station. Stood at the podium again, his chest wrapped in proper medical bandages now instead of band-aids. His burns were healing. The audience was different this time. No mockery, no dismissive laughter. Every delegate watched him with respect. Commander stood up. "Dr. Brooks, I owe you an apology. We all do. I called your medicine primitive. I was wrong." "You weren't entirely wrong," said. "Human medicine is simple, basic, but that's its strength, not its weakness." Doctor spoke next. "We would like to formally request access to human medical adhesive technology for both medical and defensive applications." Nodded to Lisa, who stepped forward with data tablets. "We're happy to share. The molecular formulas are simple. Any species can manufacture them." "Why share so freely?" an alien delegate asked. "You could charge us, make profit." "Because the point of medicine isn't profit," said. "It's saving lives. If these supplies can help others, we want them available to everyone." The conference erupted in applause. Real applause this time, not polite tolerance. Later, Station Commander Oss presented awards, and Lisa received the Galactic Lifesaver Medal, and her Marines got commendations for bravery. Jake was recognized for his quick thinking. Little presented with a drawing she'd made. It showed him covered in band-aids, standing between her and danger. Eyes got wet looking at it. The story spread fast across galactic networks. Within a week, every species in known space had heard about it. Humans defeated raiders using medical supplies. Band-aids stopped plasma rifles. The galaxy's members had proven themselves in the strangest way possible. Requests flooded in from other species. Could humans teach their emergency medicine techniques, share their adhesive formulas, help establish simple medical supply chains for frontier colonies? His response was always the same: yes. 2 months after the attack, was back on Earth. He gave a presentation at a medical school, teaching the next generation of human doctors. When he finished, a student raised their hand. "Dr. Brooks, after everything that happened, do you still believe in simple medicine?" Thought about plasma rifles and space stations. About aliens who'd mocked him and then fought beside him. About a little girl with a cracked arm and a brave heart. He thought about band-aids, simple, cheap, accessible. The kind of thing people took for granted until they needed them. More than ever, said, "Advanced technology is wonderful, but it's not always available, it's not always affordable, and it's not always necessary. Sometimes the simplest solution really is the best one." He held up a band-aid. The students laughed, but it was warm laughter, understanding laughter. "Never underestimate something just because it's simple," continued. "These stopped plasma blasts. What else might they do that we haven't discovered yet?" The class ended, packed up his materials. As he left the lecture hall, he passed a first aid station on the wall. Inside were band-aids, gauze, tape, antiseptic, the same supplies that had been there for decades. He smiled and kept walking. Somewhere out in the galaxy, other species were learning to use those same supplies. Learning that simple doesn't mean weak, that accessible doesn't mean inferior. The aliens had laughed at human band-aids. They weren't laughing anymore. And across known space, in medical stations and emergency kits and military armories, packages of adhesive bandages sat ready. Simple, basic, primitive. And absolutely priceless. D brave through everything. I have one, he said, but it's probably crazy. Danny grinned. Crazy is working pretty well for us so far. Let's move, said. They stepped into the corridor, 7 survivors wrapped in human medical supplies, heading into a war zone. Hands were shaking, but he kept walking. Behind them, the cut through the bulkhead. Ahead, the sounds of battle grew louder. And on his chest, a simple band-aid covered his heart. He pulled himself along the beam, fighting the rushing air. His muscles screamed. The child clung to him, terrified. The bulkhead was closing, 3 feet, 2 feet. Threw himself forward, rolling through the gap with the child, and the others followed. The bulkhead sealed behind them with a heavy clang. They lay on the floor, gasping, alive. That was too close, one of the aliens said. Sat up slowly. His medical kit had survived the chaos, somehow still strapped to his belt. He looked at the supplies inside. Band-aids, gauze, tape. Primitive, simple, but right now they were priceless. All delegates to emergency shelters immediately. We have unknown vessels approaching at combat speed. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The conference hall erupted into chaos. Grabbed his medical kit by instinct. Lisa was already moving toward the exits with the crowd. Around them, aliens pushed and shoved, their previous dignity forgotten in panic. Through the station's massive windows, saw lights in the distance. Ships moving fast. And they were firing weapons.